up here and the questions in front of you. The questions that we're doing, the ones I asked you to print out, are also right there at the link in this article. The answer to the last question of the clicker thing was all of the above. It was my study abroad. I went to France, and I brought it because I do encourage everyone to do it. Everybody who goes on a study abroad to another country says it was one of the best experiences of their life. Not a single person has ever regretted it. And I encourage everybody to go. And you should know that you can go, and we have people going from this university to every part of the world, and you can get 3 hours of course credit for it, upper division credit, and you know the thing on your degree sheet where you need like a D course and an I course, it'll count as your I. One thing I like about economics is that we look at issues that are just very practical many times, things that have a certain payoff, you know while you're studying. But we also look at issues that are often very profound and very, very deep issues about humans. And this game I'm showing you right here, the Prisoner's Dilemma game, is the most widely known game in the scientific world. This is a game that every economist knows, every sociologist knows, every psychologist knows, every anthropologist knows. It's been studied, it's been played by virtually every culture in the world. Intensely studied. It's studied with real people and computers. With real people and experiments. It's been studied with computers. It's one of the most important games for evolutionary biologists. Because we're going to see that it's actually a pretty good metaphor for a lot of our social life. Social interactions between humans. It turns out interactions between lots of different animals, including the vampire bat that we'll talk about. The game is almost identical to the price setting game that we played last time. Because the price setting game is just a variant of this. In the Prisoner's Dilemma game, and what we're going to do is, as I talk, I'm going to go to some of the questions and we'll talk about what some of the answers are. At the end of this lecture, I'll pull this stuff up, I'll go to the board and I'll write the question number and the answer just to make sure you didn't miss anything. In the Prisoner's Dilemma game, there are two people who are in the act of committing a crime and they're caught. But there's not enough evidence to prosecute them for what they were really trying to do. And so the police are trying to make them confess on each other. And when police don't have enough evidence, the first thing they do is try to make people confess. So what they do is they take the two people and they put them in different rooms before they have a chance to talk to each other. And then the police go to each person and they say, look, we're going to prosecute you, we're going to win, but we're going to make you a deal. And you can take this deal, but if you don't take it fast, the other person is going to. And this is the deal. The person can confess to the crime or not confess to the crime. And if they both confess to the crime, then they're both prosecuted for the big crime they were doing, and they get 3 years in jail. But if they don't confess, and they don't rat each other out, they're only prosecuted for the lesser crime, and they only get 2 years in jail. Of course, 2 years in jail is better than 3 years in jail. And so they have to choose between both don't confess or both confess. They'll both not confess. But what the police are trying to do is put them against each other. Just like we took those two twins last class and just tore them apart. Those twins will never be the same. Will never be the same. And that one friendship that was blossoming in class, gone. Gone. And that's exactly what the police are trying to do. They say, okay, here's what you do. If you confess, you're prisoner A. If you confess, but your partner does not confess, you're only going to get 1 year in jail. We're going to make a deal with you. We'll treat you well. But because you ratted the other person out, that other person didn't confess, they get 4 years in jail. So obviously, you want to rat that person out, but you better do it quick. Because if they confess, and you do not confess, you're going to get 4 years, and they're only going to get 1 year. So what's it going to be? So to tear them apart and try to make them both think they better confess now, immediately, before the other person, even though if both confess, they're going to be worse off than if they both didn't confess. That's the prisoner's dilemma game, and you need to know the game and its setup. So let's look at some of the questions just about the game. Number 1 on the sheet says, the prisoner's dilemma is a popular thought experiment in the economic field of game theory. That's true. We're doing a thing called game theory, or strategy. What you do depends on what the other person does. Game theory. Number 1 is true. Number 2, the prisoner's dilemma is about 2 prisoners deciding whether they should join a game while in prison. I never said anything about that, did I? That's false. Number 2 is false. Today I'm just seeing if you've even paid the least bit of attention to class. Number 2 is false. Number 3, the prisoner's dilemma is a thought experiment where 2 prisoners are discussing with each other about whether they should confess or not confess, each wondering whether the other will hold true to his promise. What do you think?
False.
False, because it says 2 prisoners discussing with each other. That's not the game. They are put in different rooms. There's no discussion, and that's very important. Number 3 is false. Number 4, in the prisoner's dilemma, the police attempt to make 2 prisoners confess by separating them and attempting to make each confess before the other prisoner.
True.
Yeah, number 4 is true. Number 4 is true. So number 1, true. Number 2, false. Number 3, false. Number 4, true. Now this game is only played once. I mean, you just played it like the price setting game with the twins. They only played it 1 time. And now we want to think about what are they going to do? There's lots of possibilities there. And as you try to think it through, you may be completely confused about what they're going to do. And indeed, you never really know what people are going to do. But if we use some reason, we might come away concluding that they are or both going to confess. Let's put ourselves in prisoner A's shoes, and we're going to think about a thing called dominant strategy. Dominant is like always winning. And so a dominant strategy is the strategy that always wins no matter what the other person does. We're prisoner A. Suppose we know without a doubt that prisoner B will not confess. So we know we're dealing with this column. Do we not confess or do we confess?
Yes.
Confess. If we know prisoner B is going to not confess, we would rather have 1 year than 2 years in jail, and so we confess. If we knew that prisoner B was not going to confess. But suppose we knew prisoner B was going to confess. Do we want to not confess or confess? Confess, because we'd rather have 3 years in prison than 4. So no matter what the other person does, prisoner A is always better off confessing. That is a dominant strategy. It's a strategy that wins regardless of what the other person does. And that makes this game much simpler because now you don't even need to think about what the other person does. Now, this game is symmetric. If you look at this, you think prisoner B has a dominant strategy of confessing. Yes, the game is symmetric. If we go through that same logic, we're going to see that prisoner B is better off confessing regardless of what prisoner A does. I'll do it real quick. If prisoner A, we know, is not going to confess, then prisoner B would rather have 1 year than 2 years in jail. Prisoner B would want to confess. If prisoner A we knew was going to confess, so right here, prisoner B would rather have 3 years in prison than 4 years. So again, he'd rather confess. No matter what prisoner A does, prisoner B is better off confessing. So both have dominant strategies, and if they're thinking, using the same rationale we've been using, then we would conclude that they're going to confess. And now we can answer some of these questions about dominant strategies. Number 5. A dominant strategy is a strategy that always makes both prisoners as well off as possible collectively.
True.
False.
It's false. And here's why. The key word was collectively. Suppose they do the dominant strategy. They're both going to get 3 years in prison, right? Well, collectively, it would be better if they only had 2 years in prison and didn't confess. The dominant strategy is what's best for you, regardless of what the other person does. It has nothing to do with what's best for the group. Number 5 is false. Number 6, a dominant strategy is the optimal strategy regardless of the other player's strategies. True. That's exactly how we define it. Number 7, a dominant strategy is the optimal strategy assuming the other player does what is best for her. False. With dominant strategies, it doesn't matter what the other person does. Number 8, let me just tell you it's true because I'm just telling you a definition. Number 8 is true. A dominant strategy equilibrium exists when everyone plays a dominant strategy. If both these prisoners confess, we would call that a dominant strategy equilibrium. Number 9, a dominant strategy equilibrium exists when one player consistently outplays the other. That's false. All a dominant strategy equilibrium is when everybody plays a dominant strategy. To review, number 5 is false, 6 is true, 7 is false, 8 is true, 9 is false. And we'll apply this, we'll look at a similar game in a minute and use that dominant strategy thinking all over again. Now the reason people like these games, scientists especially, is because we think it's a good metaphor for social interaction. And I say that because of this. We know that, as we said the first day of class, as humans, all alone on an island, we're almost helpless. All alone, we can do almost nothing for ourselves. But when we live together in a society, we have all of this. All these gadgets, all these beautiful people, all these great clothes, all these clickers that we can now use. And so when we work together, things work out for us, but it has to be in our incentive to work together. Now in some situations, suppose you meet a stranger for the first time, and you'll never see that person again. And suppose they drop $10 and they're walking away from you. Almost everybody here will stop that person, pick up the $10 and give it back to them. When that's completely not in your immediate best interest. So why would you do that? And you can see in the animal kingdom, vampire bats routinely, they go out, they get blood during the night. Sometimes they come home and their comrades, maybe a comrade didn't get any blood that night, and they'll share with the other animal. Despite this survival of the fittest theory we have about how they behave. So why do we see all this altruism if this is a pretty good metaphor for how the world works? And the reason is that it's not a good metaphor. It's close to being a good metaphor. It's missing something. Number 10 says, if the one-shot prisoner's dilemma game were a good metaphor for society, no one would vote, tip their waiter when out of town, or perform selfless acts for others. I'm going to say that's true. If this is really how the world behaves, we wouldn't help each other. We wouldn't cooperate very much. You wouldn't see as much altruism as we see. I'm going to show you some real behavior. This game is so popular that they've made a game show out of it in the UK.
Okay. This is serious, life-changing money. Your jackpot today is £100,150. You have one final decision to make. Easy decision. We're now going to play split or steal. know you're the last two people in the country I have to explain this to. But you have two final golden balls. You each have a golden ball with the word split written inside. You each have a golden ball with the word steal written inside. You will make a conscious choice of choosing the split or the steal ball. If you both choose the split ball, you split today's jackpot of £100,150 and you go home with £50,075. If one of you splits and one of you steals, whoever chooses the steal ball will go home with £100,150. And the person who chooses the split ball goes home with nothing. If you both choose the steal ball, you go home with nothing. Okay. Before I ask you to choose, I want you to look at your two golden balls and make sure you know which is the split ball and which is the steal ball. This is very important.
Now, I should tell you that they played before this one, and she chose split, he chose steal. So those same two people had played each other before. She chose to cooperate and split. He chose to defect and steal. And he took all the money. She got one, and now he has to play her again.
Make sure you don't show each other. Before I ask you to choose, I think you have some talking to do to each other.
Stephen, I just hope they weren't puppy dog tears and they were real tears and you were genuinely going to split that money.
I am going to split this. That's 50,000. It's unbelievable. I'm very, very happy to go on with
You were
50,000.
genuinely going to split.
If I stole off you, every single person there would run over here and lynch me.
There was no way I could. I mean, everyone who knew me would just be disgusted if I stole.
When people watch this, they're not going to believe it.
Please.
I can look you in the, Sarah, I can look you straight in the eye and tell you I am going to split. I swear down to you, I am going to split.
Okay. This is serious, mate. It is. Sarah, Steve, choose either the split or the steal ball now. Hold it up.
We're going on with 50 grand each. I promise you that.
Split or steal? You never know what's coming in this game. Congratulations, Sarah. You have just won 100,000.
That's a terrible game show. Oh.
See, when the first time that played, he did it probably exactly what was logical for him. He took the money and took hers too. I don't know, I've never seen the whole game. Maybe, I don't know if he knew whether he was going to have to play her again or not. But of course, when he did, you saw what happened. Now that is actually a pretty good metaphor for society and how people interact with society. And so when scientists use the prisoner's dilemma to help understand moral decisions, altruism, they assume that you play that game over and over and over. And so these numbers have changed, but it's the same basic game. Now, if both people betray each other and each tries to steal from each other, both lose two. That means if we all try to raid each other and take from each other, we just tear ourselves down. If we all fight against each other, no one's going to win. But if we can all cooperate and be nice to each other, everybody wins. If everybody in the world is nice, except for one person named Bailey Norwood, that person named Bailey Norwood has it pretty sweet. If he can keep doing this, if he can keep being selfish, taking from others, And they always be nice, be nice, be nice. He can just keep taking, and they keep being nice. They keep forgiving them. But that just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. When you look at animals, like the vampire bat, it doesn't happen. When the vampire bat comes home with a belly full of blood and it sees a comrade who didn't get anything that night, it will share with that bat, if that bat shared with it in the past. But if one time that bat came home and that other bat wouldn't share the blood he got, the bat never shares with him. Meaning the vampire bat that doesn't share is never given anything when it's hungry. The vampire bat that does share is always given more food when it is hungry. And so what you see, any jerk bat with a selfish gene doesn't do well because he doesn't get any food when he had an unsuccessful hunt. And so he can't breed much, he can't have much offspring. That's why vampire bats are very altruistic creatures. Was that same explanation that scientists are saying causes us to be so altruistic. It was always in our best interest to have altruistic genes. The groups that were more altruistic did that. They tended to cooperate. Groups like Neanderthals that didn't work as well together, they didn't do as well. Now what scientists have done, they've studied this game repeating with real people in experiments, with creatures like vampire bats. They've done huge computer simulations where they ask people to send in strategies for playing against another person. They put the two strategies together. And whichever person had an algorithm that made the most money would win the simulation. And no matter whether you look at vampire bats, people, computer simulations, or theoretical mathematics, we come away with one strategy that always works best for games like this. And it's something that will sound very familiar to you because it probably describes your inherent morality. And that is a tit for tat, or we can call it reciprocity, meaning if you're mean to me, I'm mean to you right back. If you're nice to me, I'm nice to you right back. Tit for tat with possible forgiveness. If people wrong us, we often forgive them and let them back into our graces, hopefully to cooperate with them in the future. But we rarely forgive people more than once. Just not how we are. Now I'm going to go back to answering some questions. Number 11, the prisoner's dilemma is a good metaphor for society if it is played repeatedly. That's true. That's what I'm trying to say. Number 11, true. 12, in the repeating prisoner's dilemma, the optimal strategy is tit for tat. I'd like you to write something. I just think it'll be a little more clearly to you. Draw an error in number 12 to tit for tat, and then I want you to write with possible forgiveness, such that the question reads, in the repeating prisoner's dilemma, the optimal strategy is tit for tat with possible forgiveness. Where you treat the other person as they treated you the previous round, periodically forgiving them to encourage future cooperation. That's true. That's what I'm trying to tell you in the last 5 minutes. Number 12, true. Number 13, in the repeating prisoner's dilemma, the prisoners eventually collude and do not confess, remaining in that strategy from that point forward. That is true as well. What we tend to find is that people, animals, computers, mathematics favor the tit for tat with possible forgiveness. Everybody thinks that's a good way to live, and people end up cooperating. And once they get to this cooperate point, they always cooperate, most of the time. Just like when people are nice to you, you tend to be nice to them back. We tend to keep our friends most of the time. Number 13, true. Number 14, in the repeating prisoner's dilemma, the optimal strategy is tit for tat, where you treat the other person as they treated you the previous round, never forgiving them when they betray you. false, because it says never forgive. There is possible forgiveness. So if it says never forgive, it's false. We do forgive periodically. Number 14, false. Number 15, in the one-shot prisoner's dilemma, players collaborate by not confessing, as they haven't been wronged yet. But in the repeating price-setting game, the players eventually find themselves in equilibrium of confessing every round. False. Actually, what we tend to find is the opposite. When Prisoner's Dilemma is played one time, people tend to confess, but in the repeating game, they end up not confessing. "17 is false. It relates to the, wait a minute, I skipped 16, didn't I? 16, 17, those are the price-setting games. It's just like Prisoner's Dilemma with different numbers. Let me just tell you that 16 is false and 17 is false. Number 18 is true. That's what we saw in the ADM video about colluding with lysine. 18 true. Number 19 is also true. And the important thing about the ADM that you might overlook if I didn't point it out to you was that when ADM colluded, they did not collude on prices, they colluded on quantity. That's why 19 it says, except instead of agreeing on prices they agreed on the quantity they would produce. It's true. That is what they agreed on, quantity. 19 true. Here. 20, The Informant is a movie about collusion in the lysine market where ADM and other lysine manufacturers playing something like a repeating price-setting game, except collusion was illegal and ADM paid the price for cooperating with their competitors. That is true. ADM ended up paying a huge fine. I can't remember how many millions of dollars it was, but it set the company back for years. Number 20, true. 21. Vampire bats always share blood with other hungry bats, regardless of whether those bats shared with them in the past. False. Vampire bats are just like you. They only share with none. 22. What we have learned from game theory, the science of evolution, simulations, and experiments is that reciprocity is a natural element of human morality. That's true. The biology of altruism is now emerging to something like this. In any animal that lives together in societies, is going to have some kind of inherent morality of reciprocity. And this is something you find in today's best psychologists and in our ancient religions. From the Analects of Confucius, the student says, is there any single word that could guide one's entire life? The master says, should it not be reciprocity? What you do not wish for yourself, do not do to others. These are quotes at the end of that article. Most of you are probably Christian. Forget that forgiveness stuff. It also says, if there is a serious injury, you ought to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, bone for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. From Exodus. And then finally, one of the best social psychologists are telling us vengeance and gratitude are moral sentiments that amplify and enforce tit for tat. Vengeful and grateful feelings appear to have evolved precisely because they are such useful tools for helping individuals create cooperative relationships, thereby reaping the gains from non 0 gains. I'm skipping ahead just a little bit. I'm going to go back to the other one. But I want you to look at number 24. Number 24 says, Confucius once said, and he did not say that. This is coming from Jonathan Haidt, social psychologist. The last sentence of this quote says, an individual who had gratitude without vengefulness would be an easy mark for exploitation. And a vengeful and ungrateful individual would quickly alienate all potential cooperative partners. So it's not Confucius that said that. It was Haidt, and 24 is false. We skipped 23, so going back to it. Markets reflect the morality of reciprocity because in markets, one never gives goods or money to others unless they receive money or goods. In this way, markets are moral. That's true. Number 23 is true. And it's because of number 23 that I do this at the beginning of this class, because we're going to spend a lot of our time talking about markets. And in many areas of life, you'll be exposed to ideas that markets are bad, that making money is selfish, that buying and selling is a hard thing to do. If you were a medieval Christian, you would have been taught it was sinful to be a merchant, always dealing with money. People like St. Francis refused to have even touch money. To even think about money was quite a sin. But that's not today, and nor do I think that's correct. In a market where people are buying and selling from each other, it's just reciprocity. I can't take stuff from you unless I compensate you. You don't owe me anything. If you want to give me charity, fine. But giving you money and you voluntarily give me something for it is much better than me taking it from you. Giving up something in return for money is just reciprocity. So markets, the buying or selling, is one of the most natural things humans can do because it resonates so closely with our inherent morality of reciprocity. I'm going to now look at the beer quality game, number 26. I'll go ahead and tell you the answer to 25 is A. Answer number 25 is A. We're going to look at 26 now. And we're going to talk about why y'all have such piss-poor beer and why the people selling beer in Oklahoma like it that way. This is part of your printout. Suppose there are 2 stores in town, only 2 beer stores, and they sell you beer. They can either sell high-quality beer with 5 to 6% alcohol or low-quality beer that tastes like water. The game is set up like this for a particular way. If both choose low-quality beer and you have no one else to go to, they still sell a lot of beer, but they don't have to pay the extra cost of producing high-quality beer. You'll probably agree that low-quality beer is cheaper to make. So they can both collude and choose low-quality beer. They save a lot of money. They still get your business. You're going to drink the stuff anyway. You've proven you will. And they make a lot of money. But if they both feel like they have to sell high-quality beer, you're buying the same amount of beer. They're spending more money to make that beer, and they're going to make less money. You can think about the 10 as being like $10 million. But of course, if one sells high-quality beer and the other sells low-quality beer, the one person selling high-quality beer gets virtually all the customers, makes a lot of money. The only one selling low-quality beer gets almost no one, and they make very little money. Now, if they could collude together and operate as one store, what would they do? They would sell high-quality beer. That's why you go to most states and they sell high-quality beer. But now let's say they're competitors. They don't work together. Maybe we make it illegal for them to make these joint decisions. Let's think about RAM. Suppose you're RAM. If Rod sells high-quality beer, what should you sell? High quality, you prefer 10 to 5. If Rod sells low-quality beer, what should you sell? What's that? High quality. If you're RAM. If Rod sells low quality, you prefer 20 to 15, so you sell high quality. Therefore, high quality is a dominant strategy for RAM. It's a dominant strategy for Rod. Well, I think I told y'all something wrong a second ago. Yeah, I'm sorry. If they could collude, what would they do? They'd sell low quality beer. They'd sell low quality beer. But if they don't collude and they're competitors, both persons' dominant strategy is what? High quality. So if they're competitors, they both sell high quality beer, they don't make as much money. They like to collude. They can ask for the dominant strategy in the question. Yeah, number 26, in the beer quality game, what is the dominant strategy for both players? High quality. High quality is the dominant strategy for both players. And so let me ask you this. This isn't on there, you don't have to know this, but just think, why do stores support the laws limiting the amount of alcohol they can put in beer? It facilitates collusion. Collusion is illegal, but they can say, we support government laws that make your beer watered down. It's the same thing as them colluding. No, and here's why. For the dominant strategy, you're not colluding together. You're not talking with each other. Let's say we're Rod, and Ram is producing high-quality beer. Well, you'd rather have 10 than 5, so you'll produce high-quality beer. If Ram is producing low-quality beer, and you know you're down here, you'd rather have 20 than 15, so again, you're going to produce high-quality beer. Okay, I'm going to pull these up, write the answers on the board if you want to see them again. If you're cool with it, you can go.
Yeah, what's 27?
Number 27 is, there's no dominant strategy for 27. Number 27 is C.